Tennis is one of the most popular sports around the world, and there are plenty of people out there betting on it. This podcast gives you an edge over the market thanks to in-depth analysis from our expert guests. Welcome to Advantage Bettors. Hello and welcome to Advantage Bettors. We have got a very special episode today because I've got a guest that I'm really excited to be chatting to. Joining me today is someone who knows a thing or two about tennis. It's seven-time Grand Slam winner, Mats Wilander. How are you, Mats?
I'm good, Ben. I'm very good. Very excited that the 2021 season is about to kick off in Australia.
That's it. First Grand Slam of the year. It's exciting times. But we've chatted a few times before, and I know you've written plenty of articles for Pinnacle. And this is something a little bit different that we haven't done before. I've got a few topics that I'd like to cover off. And obviously, you've got some very unique insight into what it's like to play tennis at the very top level. And hopefully our viewers can learn a little bit more about maybe how the players are feeling and what might be impacting their performance and ultimately for them, who might appeal in the betting markets. But the first question that I want to ask you is, what is it like at the start of the season when things are about to get underway? Obviously, as fans, we're incredibly excited about what's to come. And I know we've had a couple of 250 tour events and the ATP Cup, but this is obviously the big one, the first big one of the year. So when you're in your playing days and you're ready for the first slam, talk us through what that actually feels like.
Yeah, so usually most players arrive with, they're not too tarnished from the season before because usually November is pretty quiet, December is completely quiet, and then maybe we would have played one or two tournaments before the Australian Open. So most players, yes, you can come with a lot of confidence because you've built up your confidence over the last few years, but a lot of players come fresh. They call it the happy slam for that reason, that players come and they're fresh because they've gone through the preseason. The scars from last year are gone. But at the same time, no one is really as prepared for the Australian Open because they haven't played enough matches or the same number of matches. Maybe that's one reason why, for example, Rafa Nadal has only won one Australian Open. He needs matches, for example. But it is exciting for the players. It's so fun because you are starting with a clean slate. And again, if you have a good sort of past and you have one, you come with a lot of confidence. If you had a horrible year the year before, then you feel like, okay, this is going to be my year. So I think that a lot of upsets are possible at the Australian Open. Some of it because players are fresher than they normally are, and some of it because some of the best players might not have that confidence from having won a lot of matches the last 2 or 3 months leading up to it.
And one of I know you've been there and done it quite literally, but one of the things I guess you haven't experienced is what the people on the tour have gone through sort of last year with so many events being wiped out and stuff like that. So do you think is there any potential advantage to on the men's side, the ones that were going through to sort of the ATP finals and stuff like that, maybe getting a little bit more competitive tennis under their belt, or do you think everyone's heading into this on a level playing field?
No, I don't think it's level at all. I guess you can go through the winners, especially on the men's side, a little bit at the Australian Open. Novak Djokovic, of course, has won 8 times. What's his playing style? Doesn't make any mistakes. It will play the same in his sleep. Andre Agassi won it 4 times. Same thing, same playing style. Doesn't move. It didn't move as well, but could hit the tennis ball in his sleep. Didn't need to be that sharp. I won it 3 times. Same thing. Didn't miss that much. Didn't have to. Never trained. I always trained pretty hard, but I was always kind of at the same level. So I think the Australian Open is a tournament where if you are mentally stable, then you have a really good chance to play there. So I think that a lot of players are going to suffer because they are not able to prepare the way that they feel they have to. I'm not sure it's true that they do, but if they don't get their reps in, they lose a little bit of confidence. And therefore, and I think last year is a perfect example of that. Who were the dominant players last year? Nadal and Djokovic and Dominic Thiem. And then, of course, Daniil Medvedev come out and on the men's side and won the ATP final. So the best players in the world get even better when the circumstances are tricky. And I think the Australian Open over the years have shown that. And I think that this year is going to be very similar to that. So while there is a chance that a Rafa or a Novak has an off day, or a Serena Williams or Naomi Osaka, there's a chance because they haven't practiced as much as they want to. I think mentally these players are so strong, and it's really like you and me, Ben, here looking at each other and saying, "Am I going to lose to this guy? No, I'm not." Okay, I hate losing more than you, so you're not beating me, especially when it's 5 sets. So I think it doesn't favor the top players is the wrong word, but I do think that they will be able to deal with the circumstances much better than the lower ranked players.
And one of the other things sort of feeding into the event is the fact that unfortunately we've all experienced what it's like to be locked indoors and stuff over the last sort of year, and specifically the last couple of months, depending on where you are. But obviously what they've had to do going over to Australia is the isolation and the quarantining and everything like that. So is there anything that kind of you look to for players in that, the idea of sort of things falling into place and things beginning to click? Is, do you think that those top level guys, because of maybe the teams they have around them, or the setups that they're doing their quarantine in, it's going to be easier for them to adapt straight away?
I do think so. Yeah, I mean, tennis is a very unfair sport in at the highest level. Obviously, the guys Novak, Roger, who's not there. Unfortunately, we don't get to see Roger Federer this time. But the best players in the world, they are playing on the center court or court one at worst, and they're always playing at a good time. They always play about the same time every match. It's sort of 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or it's an evening session. And they have earned that right to be there. And I think the same thing happened with the preparation here. Those guys went to Adelaide. Naomi Osaka went to Adelaide as well. And they played an exhibition in front of a full house there. So they got some good matches there. And in a way, they were out of the room, I believe, more than other players. But that's the way it is in an individual sport. It's unfair. And they've gone through the ringer to get to that point. So I think, again, they are better at dealing with circumstances like these. Now, I have to say, and sort of from personal experience, I don't think anyone really knows where everybody is in their head in terms of the mental stability. I do think that a lot of players, which I noticed during the French Open and the US Open, they were very happy to be out there, and they felt fortunate that they were able to play professional tennis for a living again, when a lot of people weren't able to go back to work. But at the same time, has it taken the edge off of their competitiveness a little bit? And who has it affected? Does it affect Nick Kyrgios, who's a showman? Has it affected him more because he loves to play in front of people? Or has it affected the guy that he needs to play a lot of matches all the time, every week? He needs to play. I mean, I don't really know, but I do think that a lot of players are going to not feel up to it as much as they have in the past. And some other players are going to feel, hey, this is not the end of the world if I lose this match, which makes them play better. So therefore, I think there's a big chance of upsets. But in the end, I think we're going to see familiar faces winning, both the women and the men.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned there's sort of psychological element that goes into it, and now there's so much focus on it for the players. I mean, the teams they've got around them, and I'm sure the likes of Djokovic have got at least one sort of psychologist helping him with the mental side of the game. Was there much focus on that when you were playing? Was it as big of a concern back then as it is now?
It wasn't really, because it's changed a lot with the equipment, for sure. I mean, it's changed. First of all, it's changed with the prize money. In the go back to the 60s, they couldn't afford to have a coach. The Australians with Rod Laver and Ken Rosewell, and I mean, they had maybe Harry Hopman, a very famous Davis Cup captain back then. And then who was the next? Björn Borg started traveling with a full-time coach, and we're not talking mid-70s, but that was it. That coach was also giving Björn massages. I had a full-time tennis coach for 3 or 4 years. I then had a full-time tennis coach and a physical. So I think that the money has increased so much that players can afford to have him. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is that we in the past didn't hit the ball as hard. We didn't have the ammunition or the weapon in our hand with those rackets. So it became more mental, and every game was sort of a chess game. So mentally, I felt like we were as strong in the past. And I think mentally, tennis players have been as strong. Every generation is as strong. I bet you the generation in the 40s, 50s, and the 60s as strong as today's players. Physically, there is a massive difference. Physically, they're much stronger. They're faster. I maybe stamina. They're not better because they don't play as long a rallies as we used to. But so I think they need mental coaching way more than we did. And I think physically, everyone is so good that the edge could be that little bit of mental toughness at a very crucial point, because I used to play matches where every point was a mental, strategic sort of battle. And then you have guys like Novak Djokovic. Yeah, there are points when he's very smart and plays tactical tennis, but there are a lot of points where serve, return, miss, and it's even on the women's game. So there are a lot of points that you can't do anything about anymore. In my day, you could be in every single point. So I think the mental part is much, much different today.
Well, I mean, mental fatigue is obviously one thing, but another thing that certainly bettors might be looking for in terms of a potential angle is people that might be set up to play well, but are ultimately undone by fatigue, be it in one single match or just later on in the tournament. So as someone who's been in those 5-set thrillers and really sort of gone to war with someone else on the tennis court, what are kind of the early signs that fatigue is settling in? And I guess what is if you're a player, how do you try and avoid fatigue when you're out there on the court?
Yeah, that's a great question. The only way to avoid fatigue is to be so much better than your opponent that you can actually let him take the second set, because he got lucky and he broke me early, and then you got to let him go, because you can't, there's no point in fighting back. You won the first set 6-2, 6-3, and you're down 5-2 before you know it, or 4-1, and the guy's got a big serve. And then somehow you got to keep your game alive, but you kind of have to, you're not going to give him the set, but you're not going to waste any energy. But you have to be so much better than your opponent to be able to do this safely. And I think that's why the 3 out of 5 set tournaments on the men's side, it's so difficult to beat Rafa and in the past Roger and Novak and now Dominic Thiem and Daniil Medvedev. I mean, these are like 4 or 5 marathons in a row. So that's why it's hard. And the second thing I think is, the one thing I worry the most is injury, because guys are going to come out there, they're going to be so keen to play, and they're going to push themselves. And I don't think that there's one single player in either the women's or the men's draw that is 100% as prepared for this tournament as they were for the Australian Open last year. And where does it show up? It shows up in the level of their tennis somehow. But it shows up more in terms of injury, in terms of how you feel the next day. So it's going to be crucial for the players to know when to let go and when to chase the guy down.
And that's going to be, it's certainly very relevant. Sorry, when you're in Australia and normally it's a slam that the weather is so important because of the heat. Now it's actually taking place a little bit later this year, which kind of means that the conditions are a little bit cooler. But again, you've been out there, you've been in the heat. What is it like to kind of play in those conditions, and how would the weather kind of affect the way you play or the way you approach a game?
Yeah, so it's an interesting combination, the weather down in Australia, because I play the Legends doubles the last few years, and I find that the courts are much quicker there than they are at the US Open. Obviously, they're both hard courts, but they're much quicker. So the bounce and the ball, it skids through the court. Now add the temperature to that, and it's warmer than at the US Open. Doesn't have the same humidity, but it's definitely warmer on average, or normally. Maybe this time the 2 weeks makes a little bit of a difference for sure. But that makes the ball that is made mainly out of rubber, we know what happens to rubber in the heat, it gets explosive, and that goes faster. So now take that fast court and that faster ball, and you get a fast surface that if you spin it, it bounces high, and if you hit it flat, it skids through the court. Nadal has a problem there, not when it's hot, but he has a problem there when it's a little colder. So when it is a little colder, the ball tends to be a little heavier, but it still skids through the court, perfect for somebody like Novak Djokovic. And him playing at night is very, very difficult to beat in 5 sets. So it is a tough situation. We also know that Melbourne have the worst weather forecasters in the world, and they actually admit to it. Best ones are apparently in Las Vegas because it's always 85 Fahrenheit and sunny. And in Melbourne, it could literally be 12 degrees centigrade and raining in February, and it can be 37, 38, 40 degrees, and that could be in a span of sort of 24 to 36 hours. So it's very hard. You have to be really ready to play in windy conditions, cold conditions, and then the next day, oh my God, it's, we might have a heat rule in effect. And I think that's one of the toughest things about playing in Australia is you're not really sure what you're going to encounter in terms of the weather, and that affects the bounce and the speed of the court.
Well, you mentioned there that it could sort of play into Djokovic's hands especially when he's playing in the evening. So is that because of the way he hits the ball? Is it because of the defensive style? Like what sort of style of player are we talking about when we look to the weather and the court speed in Australia that could help them out?
Yeah, exactly. So Djokovic has a perfect style because he can stay close to the baseline, which you can on a faster court, because if the ball skids through the surface more than it grips and kicks up like it does on a clay court, when it skids through the surface, you can be closer to the baseline, which is where Novak likes to hang out, which is where Andre Agassi, who won 4 times, liked to hang out as well. And then Novak has this backhand that is kind of flat when he wants to, and that ball skids through the court. And even if it doesn't hit it harder than somebody like Rafa's forehand, it's a more effective shot because it skids through the court. Now, the shot that doesn't work in these conditions, or doesn't do anything, is actually Rafa's forehand. I mean, it's still one of the best shots in the world, even on this court. But comparably, what it does when he plays on a clay court or a slow hard court, it's a huge difference in the height of the bounce on his with his topspin on the forehand. So that it kind of neutralizes somebody who spins the ball. You got a big serve, then you can slice the serve, and you don't have to go for big aces, but you can slice it. And with the side spin, the ball hits the court, and it takes the other player out of the court, and then obviously opens up the other side. So yes, it does favor a guy that plays close to the baseline, hits the ball a little bit flatter. It's interesting though, because players are very used to, in Australia specifically, in having a huge Serbian contingent, a huge Croatian contingent, and they're coming. Yes, I know that there are a lot of different nationalities that are in Melbourne that live there, but there's also a lot of people that come from overseas to this tournament, and obviously they're not going to be there. So it'll be interesting to see what the fans, how they react to some of these top stars, because they live in Australia, and are they rooting for the Australians, or are they going to root for? I'm not sure. So that would be an interesting side to it. So I think the Australians are going to do very well.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's something like 10,000 spectators are going to be there. And interesting that you mentioned there this idea of home advantage, because that's bettors on other sports, specifically sort of soccer and NFL and things like that. Home advantage is massive. But for someone who played tennis, where you're traveling all around the world and you're playing at these different events, like is there much in that sort of, whether it's playing in your home country or the impact that the fans have on you as a player? What is that like? Do you kind of take things up a notch, do you think, when you're getting cheered on?
I think so. Yes, I definitely think so. I think you take it up a notch when you're cheered for, and I think you take it up a notch when they're clearly only cheering for your opponent as well, because you like to sort of break everybody's heart when that happens. But I do think so. But I think that you find, I think how it goes in tennis is you find a spot or facility, if it's indoors, or location that you like to play in. You like the surface, you like the city, you like the stadium, and then you do well. Now you do well, you're going to get the fans on your side. So that's why we have so many tournaments that are won by the same player. Nadal has won 13 French Opens. Roger Federer, I believe it's 9 Wimbledons. Novak Djokovic, 8 Australian Open, because they like the courts, they like the conditions. And then the fans get behind because they don't want to be heartbroken. So they tend to root for the favorite. So yes, it does make a huge difference for sure. But at the same time, this is going to be very different with a different crowd, way less people. So, I mean, does it help the lower ranked players to not play in front of sort of 15, 16,000 people? We know that Novak Djokovic at the US Open sort of lost his cool because he hit a ball into the side of the court first, didn't get a warning, which he would have if there was people sitting there. And then the point after that, of course, he got upset because he didn't break serve, or he got broken against Carreño Busta, and then he sort of hit that ball behind him, hit the line umpire in the throat, and then he got defaulted. So in that situation, I think the top players, yeah, they don't really care, but I do think they deal with the people being there in a much better way. They get the energy from the crowd. They understand what the crowd can do to help them, whether they're playing bad or good. So yeah, I think the crowd is a massive advantage to the higher, better player.
And where you mentioned about sort of the guys having their favorite surface to play on and stuff like that. Obviously, you do have surface specialists. Now, I don't think we could call you a specific surface specialist, because you actually won a slam title on every single surface. But maybe you can talk about the players that maybe if they do specialize in hard courts, if you're up against those players, like for example when you were playing, do you adapt your style in a certain way, or if you know they're really well suited, how do you then go about sort of taking them on and trying to dismantle them or disrupt them?
Yeah, very good. Again, are you a tennis player, Ben?
No.
You told me once you played in public, some of the public courts in.
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
recreational tennis.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's such a good question. Seriously, because that's what Rafa Nadal is trying to do against a Novak Djokovic on a hard court. That's why he's having problems. So how you deal with that is you're trying to kind of take the ball out of the strike zone for somebody like Novak. So that means hit the ball with a little bit more spin so it bounces higher, and then try to slice something that stays really low, because what you don't want Novak to just hit shot after shot after shot from about waist high, because then he never ever makes mistakes. And that's kind of why Nadal is so good on clay, because he doesn't really care if it's down by his ankles or if it's up above his head, whereas Novak is much better sort of between his chest and his knees, and that's his strike zone. So I think that's how you have to play. I think that's why the women, I believe, are much better hard court players than they are grass court or clay court, because it takes a little more skill to play on grass and clay. Because the bounce is not as clean and predictable, and B, because the spin takes more on an uneven surface like a clay court, of course, but even on a grass court. So here, you are the best hardcourt players have also unbelievably good eyesight, I've realized. Because they take the ball on the rise. So they stand so close to the baseline. They know exactly how the ball is going to react off of the court, because it's so perfect, these courts, that it doesn't matter what kind of spin's coming at them. They can calculate, or their eyes can see that, and they can hit every single shot in the middle of the racket. And that's impossible come Wimbledon or the French Open. But here, because it's faster, it's very true. And that's the problem that most players will have against somebody like Novak Djokovic. Now, last thing about that, most players today are hard court specialists. They're not big fans of clay courts. They're definitely not big fans of grass courts. And they kind of grow up playing on a hard court indoors. They want to play on hard courts outdoors. It's easier to get good on a hard court. It's better for your confidence. So I think the two hard court tournaments is where you see the best tennis in terms of ball striking. Tactically, maybe where you see the least interesting tennis compared to clay and grass.
Okay, and if we talk about then sort of specific players for this event, there's a long tennis season ahead of us, but people out there would have already done their research and thought about who they think is going to win and who might be overestimated, who might be underestimated. But for you, is there anyone out there that sort of might be flying under the radar at the moment at this event, do you think?
I wouldn't say he's flying under the radar, but I do think that Dominic Thiem is going to end this year as #1 in the world. Yeah, I do. I think that he took a step last year that was huge. He should have won the Australian Open last year, beat Rafa Nadal in an unbelievable quarterfinals match. And then he should have beaten Novak in the finals. I think he lost 6-4 in the fifth, but he kind of ran out of gas. Won the US Open this year, should have won the ATP finals. Lost to Dani Medvedev there, beat both Novak and Rafa in along the way. I do think that Dominic Thiem has figured out that I can play with Novak and Rafa. I'm actually better than them in terms of hitting the ball. Obviously, mentally, he's not as strong because they won, 20 for Rafa and 17 slams for Novak. So that builds a certain amount of confidence. But I think with them getting a little bit older, I feel like they are getting overpowered at times by certain players. And certainly when they play against Dominic Thiem, he's the one that rules. So I think Dominic Thiem is the one that he's not flying under the radar because we're talking about him as one of the favorites. But I would like to think that Dominic Thiem, this is his year to push those two guys aside. And they might pick up a slam here and there, but I don't think that they will be consistent enough the whole year or willing to play enough tournaments to stay at number one, whatever it is. I think Dominic Thiem is seeing his chance, and I feel like he's made that step, and he's at least as good as those two.
It's a bold statement, Matt. Hopefully the elite bracket up the top there does eventually get broken up, and maybe we can speak to the traders at Pinnacle and see if there's a market available for Dominic Thiem to end the season as number one. He's actually the fourth favourite currently for the Australian Open, but then so the usual suspects then, and someone like Djokovic, who we can't avoid talking about, but he's almost a 50% chance to win the event according to Pinnacle's odds, and he's one of, if not the greatest player of all time. That's a separate debate for a separate discussion, I think. But what are your chances or what do you think his chances are of winning the Australian Open this year?
I mean, huge. Absolutely huge. Obviously, he is the big favorite for sure. He is 50%. Yeah, maybe. I do think that he knows that he's not that much better than Dominic Thiem anymore because Dominic Thiem rules against him these days. I think he knows he's not much better than Rafa Nadal if he's better. I think Rafa Nadal knows the same thing as well. I think they're all worried about Dominic Thiem. They're worried about these young guys coming up. I mean, and I think a little bit of worry, that means that they can't quite predict the path to the title. I think Novak is there. I mean, he's so good. He obviously has prepared as well as he can. Now, how does last year sit with him, though, I guess? Because obviously the US Open was a massive disappointment being ejected. French Open, he played okay, didn't play great in the semifinals. He was up 2-0 against Stefanos Tsitsipas, let him come back. Maybe that's what made the difference. And then in the finals, really shocking performance by Novak against Rafa Nadal, who, of course, played an unbelievable match and tournament. And then Novak, we thought, was going to turn it on and sort of win the ATP finals and got to the O2 Arena and looked at it with flat. So does it affect him maybe that he hasn't won a tournament, really, a big tournament since the Australian Open? Might affect him a little bit, but I have a feeling he gets on that court and then suddenly, oof. Now, if there is no people or if it's very sparse, then I think that changes it a little bit for Novak, because I think Novak likes the people maybe more so than a Rafa Nadal. I think Novak plays off the people. He's quite demonstrative in often a positive way, but he does definitely play off the people. And if there is nobody in the stands, is he going to find joy in playing? I guess that's the big thing. But if there is a few people, I think that Novak he'd be tough to beat. I would put the field against Novak, and then it's 50-50.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? That winning mentality, and these guys that have won so many slams, and someone yourself who singles wise, I think it was seven Grand Slam titles. You can kind of go back there with confidence. And the flip side of that would then be for someone who hasn't broken that duck and got that first slam. How difficult do you think it is for them to actually, whether they get to the semis or the final, whatever it might be, the pressure they're under to finally get that maiden win?
I think that is so tough because, obviously Dominic Thiem won the US Open. Why? Because Nadal wasn't there and because Novak Djokovic was out. And then we saw what happened in those finals. Dominic Thiem played Alexander Zverev, and Zverev came out, played unbelievable for 2 sets. This match is over. No, not at all. Zverev started choking big time. And Thiem is still not playing great, but he's hanging in there. And in the end, it was an unbelievably entertaining final, intriguing final. But in terms of level, not very high. And there's no chance that those guys would have beaten Novak or Rafa or Roger Federer, for that matter, in a Grand Slam final. So I think that will give Novak and Rafa a bit. Well, hold on a second. We saw how they played there when they're trying to win the Slam. If that's what they do, they're not going to beat us. But so I think for it's tough. It's really tough. That's why it's so hard to win these days, because they have won so much since such a young age that you've always had to beat these guys to. And Andy Murray, you can throw him in there too. You have to beat 3 or 4 of these top 4 players and it's tough. And I don't know, Daniil Medvedev, can he do it? Maybe. I like the way he plays for sure. I like his mindset. But do they really believe that they can take out both Novak and Rafa? I don't think they do, and I don't think Novak and Rafa does for a split second. And if they do, they definitely refuse to let them know. But I do think they are getting closer physically. The younger generation, they are hitting the ball as hard, maybe harder. They're as strong, maybe stronger. They can run as far, maybe further. And of course, Novak's footwork in terms of flexibility and precision in where he puts his feet is second to none. But I think they're getting overpowered at times, and I think that helps the locker room. But in the end, 5 sets, that's it's such a mental, tactical effort to try and hang with Novak and Rafa in these conditions.
Well, then we've got the last thing I just want to talk about, and it's kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of dominance, in terms of the women's game. And the last few years, it's been wide open. I mean, it's literally like buy a lottery ticket trying to predict the winner sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think we've had like Halep, Kvitova, they've had a good crack. The younger generation, Osaka, Barty, and Sabalenka are looking good. But whether it's surface, I mean, you can obviously speak to it a little bit more than me. But why do you think we've seen so many women struggle to take that mantle off Serena and really actually dominate the women's side of the game?
Because I think you have to be a superstar to take a mantle from somebody and then dominate. And I think that in the men's game, we had one superstar, and it was Roger Federer. And then suddenly there's this freak lefty from Mallorca that suddenly, for some emotional reason, thought he could challenge the greatest player of all time. And then you have Mr. Rubberman Novak come in, and on the women's, so these 3 guys, and now throw Andy Murray in the mix. I think these 4, Wawrinka 5, they've held the level down on the men's side. Like they've squeezed them down. Listen, guys, you can't come up here. The Marin Cilic, Kei Nishikori, Milos Raonic, you can't come up here. We're on the top floor, and you're gonna have to beat 3 or 4 of us to break through and get any kind of confidence. And we're not allowing that to happen. For Serena Williams, she's been fighting this battle on her own for the last 6-7 years, because Maria Sharapova was there with her for a while, and then of course she didn't do much in the last 4 or 5 years. Her sister Venus once in a while sort of cropped up and did something, but not really. So Serena's been fighting this battle on her own. So I think the women's game has developed better, in a better direction and faster in the last 5-6 years than the men's side. I really think that those 4 guys have sort of suppressed the rest of the field, and Serena on her own hasn't been able to, because right now you have you mentioned them, but let's just go for Naomi Osaka. She serves as well as Serena Williams. She moves as well as Serena Williams. She hits the ball harder than Serena Williams, and that doesn't happen on the men's side. You know, these guys, and mentally, I feel like they are not that worried about Serena Williams. Now she hasn't won in 4 years. That's big, and I think that's why they're just, oh, I can win a major. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to freewheel it. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to really fit, and I can win a major because I don't have to beat Serena number 1, Serena number 2, Serena number 3 like on the men's side. And I think that's what you're seeing. So I don't think it's a sign of weakness by these players. I think it's just that everybody's getting so good and so strong. And I think the women, I mean, somebody's going to, kill me for this, Ben, for sure. But I do think always in women's tennis, they've always been a few years behind the men's game, and that's mainly for financial reasons. That the men have been paid more money than the women, so they have been able to bring one coach, one physical trainer, sometimes a physical therapist. And on the women's side, yes, they make the same money in the Grand Slams, but they don't make anywhere close to what the men make on their WTA tour. Therefore, they can't bring these people with them. But now they are starting to understand the benefits of having a masseuse and a physical trainer, and of course a tennis coach as well. And you see the results. These women that are 18, 19, 20, Iga Swiatek that won the French Open. I mean, they're so good. They're so strong, and they hit the ball so hard. So I think it's a sign of strength that we have different winners on the women's side.
Yeah, and the last one, I mean, you mentioned Swiatek there, and we've got all of the names that were previously mentioned: Osaka, Sabalenka, Barty, in this order, Swiatek, and then Halep in terms of the markets for the outright winner. Is there, I know it's difficult because you just said how unpredictable it is, but is there someone that jumps out to you sort of as potential that could really be the standout candidate?
I think Ash Barty, I have to say. She hasn't been in quarantine. She's been home in Australia. She hasn't played a match in a long time, but she's you can always figure that out. You can play matches. You can figure out competitive matches at home on the practice court, whatever. So I don't think that's a problem. I think if Ash Barty survives the first couple of rounds, and by surviving, I literally mean she just has to win those matches, gain a little bit of confidence, and know that she's in it. Because the first two rounds are going to be very nerve wracking for all the players, and especially for somebody like Ash Barty, who she should win another major soon. This year would be nearly a necessity if she's going to make a big mark on women's tennis. And I think that the courts are quick enough where her backhand is her weakness, but because she has a really good one-handed slice backhand, she can use that on a faster court. She can keep the ball low. No one plays like her. And if some of these big ball strikers, you mentioned Arina Sabalenka, for example, huge ball striker, Naomi Osaka, huge ball striker. They need to hit a lot of tennis balls to hit the ball that clean, and they haven't because of the quarantine and the situation that we've been in now for nearly a year. So they haven't really hit them many balls. And I think Ash Barty, this is her chance to win her Australian Open. And to me, I have to say, I think I have to put her as the #1 favorite.
I'm looking at the time, Mats, and it's absolutely flown by since we started chatting. So we'll wrap things up, and it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I'm sure you're very busy. I want to say a big thank you from me and the viewers for coming on and helping us learn a little bit more about playing the game at an elite level and how that can be maybe used to help people find an edge in the market. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you could use that edge even on the public tennis courts in wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and we will have Mats back again soon, and you can have the chance to ask him some questions and get more insight into the life of a professional tennis player. We've got all the latest tennis odds on pinnacle.com. Good luck with your bets, and remember to please gamble responsibly.